3 simple ways to leave avoidance and emotional chaos without regret. How many of you have ever felt like you were chasing someone who just kept pulling away? How many of you have poured your heart into someone only to get breadcrumbs in return? Guess what? You're not alone. But today we're flipping the script, because let me tell you something. There is a way to turn the tables. There is a way to reclaim your power, leave avoidance and emotional chaos, and walk away with 0 regrets. And the best part? You don't have to manipulate, you don't have to beg, you just have to shift your energy. Avoidants operate in patterns. They build a system of push and pull, keeping you at arm's length while still holding on to you just enough to keep you hooked. They thrive on control, not in the overt, aggressive way of a dominant personality, but in the quiet, subtle way that keeps you emotionally chasing. They create an invisible contract. You will always be the one who reaches out first, who waits, who reassures, who proves your worth. And as long as you keep fulfilling that contract, they never have to change. But here's what most people don't realize. Avoidants don't just expect this pattern, they depend on it. It gives them a sense of security. They know exactly how you will respond, exactly how much space they need to take before you start to feel anxious and reel them back in. This predictability allows them to hold on to their emotional distance while keeping you attached. It's a cycle, and it works because you participate in it. Now imagine what happens when that pattern is broken. Imagine what happens when you stop responding the way they expect. When they pull away, instead of chasing, you let them go. Instead of sending that long, heartfelt text, you go silent. Instead of waiting by your phone for their response, you live your life fully with 0 regard for their absence. What happens then? Their sense of control starts to slip. Their certainty begins to waver. Most people believe that the way to make someone see their worth is to convince them, to prove, to explain, to remind. But the truth is, nothing is more unsettling to an avoidant than unpredictability. When they reach for their usual control levers and find that they don't work anymore, it triggers something deep inside them. It forces them to face emotions they have spent years avoiding. They begin to feel a sense of loss, of confusion, of disorientation. At first, they may act as if they don't care. They might even feel relief, assuming that the shift in dynamic means they have more space, more freedom. But what happens when freedom starts to feel like isolation? What happens when the predictable reassurance of your presence disappears completely? The same emotional walls they built to protect themselves become their own prison. Because deep down, avoidance is not about not wanting connection, it's about fearing it. And nothing brings that fear to the surface more than the absence of the one person who always made them feel secure. Many people worry that if they stop reaching out, if they stop proving their love, the avoidant will simply move on. And that's possible. But here's the truth. If someone only stays because you are constantly proving your worth, then you were never truly valued in the first place. Real power comes from being able to walk away, to know that your value is not something you have to convince anyone of. When you break the pattern, you shift the entire dynamic. You force the avoidant to deal with emotions they are not prepared for, and that's when real chaos begins. They may try to regain control. They may send you a casual message pretending nothing happened. They may post something on social media designed to get your attention. They may even disappear completely, hoping that their absence will force you to come running back. But if you stay firm, if you refuse to engage in the cycle again, that's when the shift becomes permanent. That's when the power moves fully into your hands. And the best part? You don't have to do anything manipulative. You don't have to be cold, mean, or distant. You just have to stop playing their game. Because the second you become unpredictable, the second they can no longer anticipate your every move, the illusion of control they have relied on starts to crumble. And in that moment, they are left alone with the very emotions they have spent their entire lives avoiding. Avoidants don't just fear closeness, they fear the weight of someone else's emotional investment. They don't want to feel responsible for another person's emotions, and they don't want to feel like they are the center of someone's world. But here's the paradox. While they fear being overwhelmed by connection, they also rely on knowing that you are emotionally invested. They may pull away, but they always assume that you will be there when they decide to return. Your energy is what feeds this dynamic. When you focus on them, when you analyze their behavior, when you try to figure out why they are distant, all of your emotional energy is still flowing toward them. Even if you are not actively reaching out, they can sense when they are still the center of your thoughts. They have an intuitive ability to feel when someone is emotionally tethered to them, and as long as they know that you are still invested, they feel safe keeping their distance. They don't need to chase you because they know you are still in the background, waiting, hoping, longing. But the moment you shift your energy elsewhere, everything changes. Instead of obsessing over their mixed signals, you start pouring your energy into yourself. Instead of waiting for their validation, you begin creating your own. You focus on your passions, your goals, your friendships, your growth. And when that happens, something deep within them gets triggered because suddenly the dynamic they relied on no longer exists. Avoidants are not used to feeling a true loss of control. They assume that they can come and go as they please, that they can keep their distance without consequences. But when you stop feeding their illusion of security, when you stop giving them the comfort of your emotional investment, they begin to feel something they have spent their entire lives avoiding: uncertainty. At first, they may not even recognize what is happening. They may tell themselves that they are relieved you have stopped trying so hard, that the pressure is gone. But as time passes and they realize that your energy is no longer directed toward them, an uncomfortable feeling starts to creep in. It starts subtly. Perhaps they check your social media expecting to see a post that hints at your sadness, but instead they see you thriving. Maybe they send a casual message expecting you to respond immediately like you always have, but instead you take your time, or worse, you don't respond at all. That's when the internal chaos begins. Avoidants rarely experience the full weight of their own emotions because they always keep one foot out the door. But when they realize that the person who once made them feel important, the person who always reached out, is no longer there, they are forced to confront something they are deeply uncomfortable with, the idea that they might have lost something valuable. This is not about playing games or trying to manipulate them into chasing you. It's about shifting your focus away from someone who has proven that they cannot meet your emotional needs and redirecting it towards something that actually fulfills you. The beauty of this shift is that it doesn't just create emotional chaos for the avoidant, it also frees you. You begin to realize that your happiness was never meant to be dependent on someone who only gives you pieces of themselves. You begin to see that all the energy you were pouring into them was energy that could have been used to create the life you actually want. And when you make this shift, you stop waiting. You stop wondering if they will reach out, if they will change, if they will finally realize what they had. Because by the time they do, you will have already moved on. And that is what truly unsettles them. Not the loss of control, not the silence, but the realization that you are no longer emotionally available to be part of their cycle. That realization shakes them to their core, because for the first time, they are forced to sit with their own emotions without you there to absorb them. Most people believe that closure is necessary to move on. They think that in order to truly let go, they need a final conversation, a last exchange of words, an opportunity to explain themselves and hear the other person's perspective. But when dealing with an avoidant, this is exactly where people go wrong. Closure is not something you give to an avoidant. It's something you take for yourself, because the moment you try to seek closure from them, you're playing right into their hands. Avoidants are masters of ambiguity. They rarely offer clear answers, and they thrive on leaving things open-ended. They do this because it gives them a sense of control. They don't have to commit, but they also don't have to completely lose you. If you ask for a conversation, they'll either avoid it, downplay your emotions, or give you just enough reassurance to keep you from fully walking away. It's a cycle designed to keep you emotionally tied to them while allowing them to remain distant. But here's the thing. Closure isn't about understanding why they behaved the way they did. It's not about getting an apology or finally making them realize what they lost. True closure happens the moment you decide you're done. And the most powerful way to create emotional chaos for an avoidant is to leave without explanation. No text, no final message, no dramatic goodbye, just silence. When someone is used to you always reaching out, always explaining yourself, always trying to fix things, your silence becomes deafening. It creates an emotional vacuum that they don't know how to process. Avoidants are used to being the ones who control the dynamic. They pull away, you chase. They become distant, you seek clarity. But when you disappear without warning, that pattern is broken, and they are left with nothing but their own unresolved emotions. At first, they may act like they don't care. They may convince themselves that you simply gave up, that you were never that important to them in the first place. But as time goes on, something starts to shift. Instead of feeling relief, they begin to feel discomfort. Instead of feeling free, they start to feel uncertain. Because the one thing an avoidant fears more than commitment is being forgotten. And when you leave without a trace, you force them to sit with the question they've spent their whole lives avoiding. Did I just lose something that actually mattered? This kind of chaos isn't loud. It's not dramatic. It doesn't come from arguments or ultimatums. It comes from the sheer weight of the unknown. When an avoidant doesn't get closure, their mind starts searching for answers. They start replaying conversations in their head, trying to figure out what happened. They start wondering why you didn't fight harder, why you didn't explain yourself like you always did. And that lingering uncertainty is what truly unsettles them. They may try to regain control. Maybe they send a casual, "Hey, how have you been?" texts. Maybe they like one of your social media posts to see if you'll react. Maybe they wait assuming that eventually you'll reach out to them like you always have. But when you don't, the emotional chaos deepens. This isn't about being cruel or playing games. It's about refusing to be part of a dynamic that drains you. It's about recognizing that the person who refuses to meet you halfway does not deserve a front row seat in your life. You don't need their validation to move on. You don't need a final conversation to prove your worth. The only closure you need is the decision to walk away and never look back. And here's the beautiful part. By the time they realize what they lost, by the time they reach out, you won't even want to respond because you have already reclaimed your energy, your power, and your peace. And that is the ultimate shift, not just for them, but for you. Avoidants function within a carefully crafted emotional framework that allows them to feel safe. They maintain a sense of control by keeping emotional distance, knowing that even if they pull away, the other person will always be there waiting, wanting, and hoping for more. This creates a dynamic where they don't actually have to face loss because they assume that no matter how much space they take, they can always return when it feels convenient for them. But what happens when that assumption is shattered? What happens when the person they took for granted is suddenly gone, not just physically, but emotionally? That's when everything changes. Most people make the mistake of thinking that an avoidant will feel the loss immediately. They expect them to react quickly, to suddenly realize their mistake, to chase them the moment they pull away. But avoidants don't process emotions like that. At first, they might feel relief. They might even convince themselves that they're better off without the pressure of emotional closeness. But as time passes, a void begins to form. A void they didn't expect. That void is created when they no longer feel your energy in their world. It's not just about physical presence or messages. It's about the absence of something they never fully acknowledged while they had it, your emotional availability. Avoidants are used to people waiting for them, checking in on them, giving them space while still being emotionally accessible. They rely on that unspoken promise that you will always be there, but when that emotional safety net disappears, they are left in unfamiliar territory. At first, they might not even recognize what's happening. They'll continue on as usual, believing that nothing has changed. But slowly, that certainty starts to crack. Maybe they go to send you a message and hesitate because they don't know how you'll respond. Maybe they realize that the reassurance they used to feel, knowing you were still there in the background, is gone. They start to feel an unease they can't quite put into words, and that unease grows into something deeper, a sense of loss. Loss is a feeling avoidants have spent their whole lives running from. They have built their identity around avoiding deep emotional pain, around keeping people at a safe distance, so they never have to experience true rejection or abandonment. But when someone who was once emotionally invested in them disappears without warning, they are forced to face the one thing they have spent years avoiding, the reality that they are not in control. This is why truly pulling away on both an emotional and physical level creates so much chaos for them. Unlike someone who is secure in their emotions, an avoidant doesn't know how to process feelings of uncertainty and vulnerability. They are used to being the one who dictates the flow of the relationship, but when that control is taken from them, their usual coping mechanisms stop working. They can't retreat into distance because you're already gone. They can't rationalize their emotions away because something feels different. And worst of all, they can't shake the growing realization that maybe they made a mistake. This shift doesn't happen overnight. It builds over time as they start to recognize the absence of something they once took for granted. They might try to distract themselves, throw themselves into work, or seek attention elsewhere. But nothing quite fills the space that was left behind. And that's because it's not just about missing you, it's about missing the security they felt when they knew you were always there. At this stage, many avoidants will attempt to reestablish control in small, subtle ways. They might reach out in a casual way, testing the waters to see if you'll respond. They might post something on social media designed to get your attention. They might even act as if nothing happened, hoping that you'll fall back into the old dynamic. But if you remain detached, if you continue living your life without seeking their validation, that's when the real emotional chaos sets in, because for the first time, they are forced to sit with the full weight of what they lost. They can no longer assume that you're just waiting in the background. They can no longer rely on the unspoken promise of your presence. And without that sense of control, they are left with nothing but their own emotions they have spent a lifetime trying to escape. Avoidants thrive on knowing that they have the upper hand in emotional dynamics. They rely on the idea that no matter how much they push you away, you will always be there, waiting, ready to accept whatever breadcrumbs they decide to offer. This sense of control gives them a feeling of emotional safety. They don't have to engage deeply because they assume that you will always be the one to initiate, to care, to fight for the connection. But what happens when that assumption is shattered? What happens when you stop waiting and start moving on without them? That's when their world begins to unravel. The most powerful shift you can make is to live as though they no longer exist in your emotional landscape. Not in a way that is forced, not in a way that is meant to punish them, but in a way that is genuine. This is not about pretending to be okay while secretly hoping they notice. It's about truly reclaiming your energy and redirecting it towards something that actually fulfills you. In the moment they realize that they are no longer the center of your world, an internal chaos begins to take hold. At first, they might not notice. Avoidants are skilled at compartmentalizing, at convincing themselves that they are unaffected by emotional shifts. They may even feel relieved, believing that they have finally gotten the space they wanted. But over time, something begins to feel off to them. The energy they once felt from you, the quiet reassurance of your presence, the knowledge that you were still emotionally attached, is suddenly gone. They may not understand why it bothers them at first, but they will feel it. Avoidants are not used to experiencing true loss. Because they keep people at arm's length, they rarely have to confront the reality of someone actually leaving them behind. Most of their relationships operate in a cycle: distance, chase, reassurance, repeat. But when someone disrupts this cycle by truly moving on, it forces them to sit with emotions they are deeply uncomfortable with. This is where their internal battle begins. On the surface, they may act as if they don't care. They may continue living their life as usual, pretending that your absence means nothing to them. But underneath that facade, something unsettling is happening. They start wondering why you aren't reaching out. They start questioning why you aren't affected in the way they expected you to be. And that's when the doubts creep in. Perhaps they were wrong about you. Perhaps they underestimated your ability to walk away. Perhaps, for the first time, they are the ones feeling unsure, unsteady, out of control. This is a terrifying experience for someone who has spent their whole life avoiding vulnerability. They have built their identity around emotional independence, around believing that they don't need deep connections. But when they see you moving forward, when they see that you are not just surviving but thriving without them, it forces them to confront something they never expected, the possibility that they made a mistake. The real chaos happens when they realize they no longer have access to you in the way they once did. It's not just about missing you, it's about missing the power they once held in the relationship. They no longer have the comfort of knowing that you are still emotionally invested. They can no longer assume that they can return whenever they choose, and that realization is deeply unsettling for them. Some avoidants will try to reestablish control at this point. They may reach out with a casual message, testing to see if they can still pull you back in. They may create opportunities to run into you or engage in subtle tactics to gauge your reaction. But if you continue to hold your ground, if you remain focused on yourself and refuse to give them the validation they seek, that's when they truly begin to spiral. This is not about revenge or manipulation. It's about recognizing your own value and refusing to participate in a dynamic that leaves you emotionally drained. The power shift happens when you realize that you don't need them. You never did. And by the time they understand what they've lost, it won't even matter to you anymore, because by then you have already moved on to something better, something that actually meets your needs, fulfills you, and allows you to experience the love and connection you truly deserve. Avoidants operate in a world where emotions are managed, controlled, and kept at a safe distance. They have spent their entire lives perfecting the ability to detach, to withdraw when feelings become too overwhelming, and to maintain a sense of power in their relationships by never fully investing. They assume that no matter what, they will always have the upper hand because they believe emotions are a weakness, something they can rise above while others are left drowning in feelings. But what they don't realize is that their need for control only works as long as you continue to react to them. The moment you stop responding in the way they expect, their carefully constructed emotional framework starts to collapse. Avoidants expect you to seek closure. They expect you to chase them when they pull away. They expect you to remain emotionally engaged even when they are not reciprocating. But when you stop doing what they expect, when you refuse to react, when you don't try to make sense of their behavior, when you simply let them go, you strip them of their power, this is where the real emotional chaos begins. At first, they may feel relief. They may convince themselves that the pressure is finally gone, that they have successfully created the distance they need. But as time passes, something shifts. They begin to realize that your absence is not temporary. You are not waiting for them to return. You are not reaching out. And most importantly, you are not giving them the emotional safety net they have always relied on. This is terrifying for an avoidant because it forces them to sit with feelings they have never properly processed. For the first time, they are left alone with their own emotions, with no one to project them onto, no one to absorb their detachment, no one to give them the reassurance that they can always return whenever they choose. That sense of certainty they once had that you would always be there vanishes. and in its place, they are left with a discomfort they cannot ignore. They may try to dismiss it at first. They may tell themselves that it doesn't matter, that they never needed the connection in the first place. But deep down, something is unsettled, because when you remove yourself completely, you disrupt the balance they have depended on. And when they start to feel the loss, it is not just about missing you. It is about losing the sense of control they always assumed they had. This is when their mind begins to turn against them. Instead of feeling powerful, they start questioning themselves. They wonder why you haven't reached out. They replay past conversations looking for clues. They may even begin to feel something they rarely allow themselves to feel: regret. Not necessarily because they are ready to change, but because they never expected to be the one left wondering, the one left uncertain, the one feeling a sense of loss they don't know how to manage. In response, they may test the waters. Maybe they send a casual message, hoping to gauge your reaction. Maybe they try to provoke a response by posting something that would normally trigger you. Maybe they even attempt to reappear in your life in subtle ways just to see if they can still affect you. But when you remain unbothered, when you continue living as if their absence makes no difference, that is when the emotional chaos deepens. Because for the first time, they are experiencing the very thing they have always tried to avoid: uncertainty. And that uncertainty is what keeps them awake at night, questioning everything they thought they knew about themselves and about the control they believed they had. Avoidance build their identity around the belief that they do not need deep emotional connections to feel fulfilled. They convince themselves that attachment is optional, that they are better off keeping people at arm's length, and that true independence means never relying on anyone emotionally. This mindset allows them to navigate relationships in a way that feels safe, always keeping one foot out the door, always ensuring they can walk away without experiencing real loss. But this belief system only holds up as long as they feel in control. The moment that control is taken away, the illusion begins to crumble, and they are left facing emotions they never expected. One of the most powerful ways to create emotional chaos for an avoidant is to stop proving your worth to them. Avoidants expect people to seek their validation. They expect to be chased, to be reassured, to be prioritized, even when they are unwilling to reciprocate. They assume that no matter how much they pull away, you will still be there, hoping for a shift, waiting for them to come around. But when you stop seeking their approval, when you stop trying to prove that you are worth their time, their love, or their commitment, you shatter their sense of certainty. At first, they may not notice. They may assume that you are simply giving them space, that eventually you will return to the familiar pattern of trying to reconnect. But when the days turn into weeks, and they realize that you are no longer waiting for them, a deep sense of unease sets in. They start questioning what changed. They wonder why you aren't fighting for them. They begin to feel something they rarely allow themselves to feel: doubt. This doubt is what creates the emotional chaos. Avoidants are used to believing that they hold all the power in their relationships. They assume that they are the ones who decide when a connection ends, who determines how much emotional investment is given, and who gets to control the narrative. But when you remove yourself from that equation entirely, when you no longer seek their validation, when you no longer care about proving your worth, their reality shifts in a way they are not prepared for. Suddenly, they are no longer the ones making the decisions. They are no longer the ones dictating the terms of the connection. And most importantly, they are no longer certain that they were right about you. Because if they truly didn't care, if they truly never needed the relationship, then why does your absence feel so unsettling? Why do they find themselves checking their phone, wondering if you'll ever reach out? Why do they feel an emptiness they can't explain? This is where their emotional walls begin to work against them. Because they have spent so long avoiding deep emotional experiences, they do not know how to process these feelings in a healthy way. Instead of facing them, they may try to suppress them. They may distract themselves with work, hobbies, or even new connections. But no matter how much they try to ignore it, the unease lingers, the thought remains, the uncertainty grows. Some avoidants will attempt to regain control by reaching out in subtle ways, testing to see if they can still affect you. Others will remain silent, caught in an internal struggle they don't know how to resolve. But no matter how they respond, the truth remains the same. They are no longer in control, and the emotional safety net they always relied on is gone. And that realization, more than anything else, is what throws them into chaos. At the end of the day, the real power does not lie in making an avoidant suffer. It lies in reclaiming your own emotional energy and refusing to participate in a dynamic that drains you. This is not about revenge. It is not about proving a point. It's about recognizing your own value, about stepping into your own strength, and about making the conscious choice to remove yourself from a cycle that no longer serves you. When you stop chasing, stop explaining, stop waiting, when you truly walk away, not just physically, but emotionally, that is when the balance of power shifts. And the moment they realize they have lost access to the energy they once took for granted, that is when their world begins to unravel. Not because you forced it, not because you manipulated them, but but because they were never prepared to face true loss. But here's the truth. By the time they recognize what they lost, it won't even matter to you anymore, because you will already be standing in your power. You will already be free. You will already be creating a life where you no longer seek validation from someone who was never willing to give you what you deserved in the first place. And that, more than anything, is what real emotional strength looks like. Thank you for your time, your energy, and your willingness to step into the truth of your own worth. Remember, you don't need to seek validation from someone who only values you when they feel like it. You are powerful, you are enough, and you are in control of your own happiness. Keep walking forward and never look back. Thank you.